Welcome back my fellow Spartans to the Triple S Variety channel. I'm your host Triple S, and in this video I'll be breaking down and reviewing the third episode of the second season of the Halo TV show titled Visegrad. Now let's begin. Point number 1. If Visegrad sounds familiar to you, it's because it's the location Noble Team discovered the Covenant were on Reach in the game Halo Reach. Point number 2. This captain handled this situation in such a moronic way, having all of her Marines pointing their guns at Silver Team and then pointing her own at Chief. It's like she intentionally wanted to antagonize them and get a violent reaction. Point number 3. So if the larger keystone wasn't secretly being held at Visegrad Relay, where was it being held then when Maquis and the Arbiter found it at the end of the last episode? Point number 4. Here we see Akason's dad, who never actually gets named and is just called Akason's father on both Wikipedia and IMDb, played by Scottish actor Bill Patterson. He's appeared in a lot of TV shows and movies, but his last role before this show was in House of the Dragon as Lyman Beesbury. Point number 5. I wonder if Akason's father and Uncle Arthur took inspiration from Star Wars Rebels when building this bridge, since to me it looks a lot like the symbol for Fulcrum. Point number 6. So in the Silver timeline, Akason had a sister, Julia, whereas in the Blue timeline he had a brother, Ruin, who appeared in the comic book series Halo Uprising, which took place during the Battle for Earth. You know, when the Prophet of Regret's fleet attacked Earth at the start of Halo 2. He had himself injected with organic tracking material and convinced the Covenant to take him aboard the battlecruiser, the Harbinger of Piety, to talk to the Prophet, the Minister of Inquisition. The orbital defense platform Nassau then locked onto his position and destroyed the Covenant ship with its Mach gun. Point number 7. Well, I miscalled what Keyes was referring to when he said that Chief had a delusion. I thought Chief had told him he saw Maquis on Sanctuary, but instead, Chief believing Cobalt Team and the Covenant were at Visegrad Relay was what Keyes was calling the delusion. Point number 8. Actis 4 is an actual planet from the Blue timeline and first appeared in the comic book series Halo Escalation. In the Blue timeline, they didn't actually investigate the surface of the planet until 2558, and when they did, they discovered foreigner structures. Presumably since the UNSC in the Silver timeline know of Actis 4 in 2552, or is it 2553 now? They most likely checked out the planet and not found anything left behind by the foreigners. Point number 9. So I was right in my breakdown of the trailers that Lewis was in a relationship. I just got the person wrong. He ain't going out with Riz, but instead with Danilo, played by Christian Okoye Lavernia, who, fun fact, in 2023 was in a movie called The Covenant. And I'm sure a lot of morons hate that the show has introduced a homosexual relationship between an ex-Spartan and a normal guy, but those people are a dying breed and will soon no longer be a detriment to the progression of the human race. Point number 10. I love the juxtaposition between Riz and Kai here. Riz has gone to see Lewis to find out how to live a life outside of being a Spartan, as if she seems to be considering giving it up, whereas Kai has gone to Akason to convince him to continue to let her fight, even if it means she has to do it without her team, as if she can't be anything else but a Spartan. Point number 11. I also love Akason trying to convince Kai to let the idea of Chief getting better go, is also him trying to convince himself to let the idea of his dad getting better go, and go through with his dad's request of not letting the Covenant take him alive. Point number 12. Quan Ha talking about how she failed her planet and people by not being able to protect it like all the past generations of her family have. Quan, they wouldn't have been able to defend it against a collection of alien races capable of turning planets to glass from orbit either. Don't beat yourself up over it. Point number 13. I find it funny Quan says they can blend in with the arriving refugees when Lyra sticks out like a main anime character in a crowd of nobodies. Point number 14. I called it. I called the 4 dead bodies being Cobalt Team in my breakdown video of episodes 1 and 2. Add another W to the pile. A very sad W this time though. Poor Cobalt Team, we hardly knew thee. Especially Lee 008, who we barely saw and didn't even hear speak. Point number 15. If you don't already know, dead Spartans are always listed as MIA as per only Directive 930, as it is believed to list them publicly as KIA would be devastating for morale. This is where the phrase Spartans never die comes from. Point number 16. Keyes mentions the winter contingency, and the 17th Silver debrief on the Halo Waypoint website has this to say about it. This episode has a number of interesting connections to certain elements of core canon concerning the fall of Reach. No doubt you all caught Admiral Jacob Keyes name-dropping Winter Contingency, an emergency protocol that serves as the namesake of the first playable mission in Halo Reach, where Noble Team discovers the Covenant already deployed on the planet. The Silver debrief also goes on to talk about how Oni knew the Covenant were already on Reach. But something that these opening episodes of Season 2 have been exploring is the fact that the Office of Naval Intelligence knew about the Covenant's presence on Reach in advance of the main invasion. A series of data drops back in 2011 sought to deliver some truth and reconciliation around certain details and differences between the 2001 novel Halo: The Fall of Reach and and the game. These took the form of communiques between Admiral Margaret Parangosky and Vice Admiral Hieronymus Stanforth regarding Oni's statistical analysis efforts to track the Covenant's recent advances and determine which colonies stood the highest risk of invasion. By July 19th, 2552, the Epsilon Eridani system returned a probability of 87.2%, a parallel that the show drew in the previous episode in the conversation between Akison and Cortana. This was a prescient result, as Noble Team would discover the Covenant's presence on the planet less than a week later on July 23rd. As a result of this, Parangosky and Stanforth considered the viability of using Reach as an opportunity to launch Operation Red Flag, a last-ditch effort to send the remaining Spartans to the Covenant homeworld, what would later be discovered to be High Charity, with the objective of capturing a profit and forcibly negotiating a ceasefire. They note, however, that the military cost of such a gambit would be the greatest military sacrifice in human history. Point number 17, I find it funny Akison is acting both very Spartan and very un-Spartan-like here. And by Spartan, I mean the ancient Greek Spartans who fought against the Persian army at Thermopylae, even when they knew it would mean their deaths. They fought even though they weren't going to win. But then Akison says essential assets are being transported off the planet, which to me just sounds like corporate speak for the leadership are fleeing to safety whilst leaving the civilians behind to die. That would be like if when King Leonidas found out Ephialtes had betrayed them, he fled back to Sparta whilst leaving all his men to die. Point number 18, base keys just telling it how it is straight to Akison's face. Point number 19, in the Halo Declassified video for this episode, we get to see more of this location that they refer to as the Reach Undercity. Reminds me of the lower levels of Coruscant in Star Wars. The area in the Undercity that stood out to me the most was the arcade, where you can see games such as Slip Space Invaders, the Spartan Attack game that was mentioned in the previous episode, which uses a fake assault rifle controller and looks like a VR Spartan helmet, and a Condor flight simulator. Point number 20, if Parangosky hasn't actually left Oni and is just posing as a civilian, I totally sort of called it in my previous breakdown video when I said, if Silver Timeline Parangosky had the same power, influence, and secret knowledge that Blue Timeline Parangosky had, then her being made to take the fall for Halsey escaping and then becoming a, as she says, regular Joe, is the most impossible change the Silver Timeline has made from the Blue Timeline. Point number 21, damn, Silver Timeline Akison has so much more of a reason to hate Halsey than Blue Timeline Akison, considering she had his sister kidnapped to become a Spartan and replaced her with a Flash clone intended to die shortly after. Kinda morbid though that Akison's been making multiple clones of his own sister despite knowing they wouldn't live very long. Like, I get it if he was doing it as something to torment Halsey with, like, here's my sister you kidnapped and killed, and now you get to watch her die over and over again to remind you of that. But since Halsey asks Akison if he thought she didn't know who Julia was, that then doesn't seem to have been Akison's intentions at all. Point number 22, it's a good job Antares and Karina decided to try and kill Lyra by suffocating her, since there's no way Quan would have been able to save her if Karina had decided to actually just pull the trigger. Point number 23, I've heard people complain that it makes no sense how Quan could take out Soren's crew, but when you consider the fact that they didn't know she was on board, so she had the element of surprise, and all she had to do was stab them in the neck to kill them silently, it's absolutely believable that she killed them. What doesn't make sense to me though, is where did Karina go after she tossed Lyra into the airlock? Where was she when Quan killed Antares, and what was she doing just sneaking up behind Lyra and Quan and not shooting them? Point number 24, I called it again, folks. All the way back when I broke down the official trailer for this season, I wondered who was narrating and saying this message from the Covenant. Was it McKee or someone who translated a Covenant message? I'll take another W, thank you very much. Point number 25, I wonder what Vanek pulls out of his locker here that he was hiding behind his boots. I like to think it's jelly babies. Also, is it just a regular thing for Spartans to hide things in their lockers under or behind other stuff? Point number 26, in my last breakdown video, we looked at the teams on the board with the help of Dill Pickle 6194's post on the r/Halo subreddit. In that post, they guessed the members of Gold Team were Nora075, Nicholas064, Oliver113, Claude148, Peter133, and Ruth147. However, we get a clearer look at the members of Gold Team here, and we see instead of Nora075 and Nicholas064, it's instead May151 and Nikolai068. Both their names and service numbers are unique to the Silver Timeline. Also, I actually completely missed in my previous video that there is in fact a Spartan 2 called Lee008 in the Blue Timeline who first appeared in the novel First Strike. I just assumed all the names and service numbers of Cobalt Team were unique to the Silver Timeline. Another thing as well is that in the Blue Timeline, Lee is a man, whereas in the Silver Timeline, they're a woman. Point number 27, translating the Covenant message, Talia says, I am Var Gatanai. Is this the name of the Silver Timeline Arbiter, or is it some form of title, like Arbiter? The Archive of Our Own page of David J. Peterson, the person who has created the Covenant language for the show, posted the original Sangheili for Var-Gatanai as being Barrow-Gatanai. If Barrow-Gatanai is meant to be the proper name for this Arbiter, why would it be translated as Var-Gatanai? Proper names aren't meant to be translated. If Var-Gatanai is actually meant to be the proper name for the Silver Timeline Arbiter though, it's interesting the show has gone with the AI suffix rather than the more common EE suffix, like Felvadami, the name of the Blue Timeline Arbiter. According to the 2009 edition of the Halo Encyclopedia, which you can't buy on Kindle and costs way too much for physical, so I just have to go on what Halopedia tells me the book says, whilst the -EE suffix denotes military service, the -AI suffix denotes swordsmanship, which actually makes a lot of sense since the Silver Timeline Arbiter really seems to favour using his energy sword. Point number 28, it's a shame they didn't have the Arbiter say something similar to the Prophet of Regret's message to humanity, your destruction is the will of the gods and we are their instrument, from the novel The Fall of Reach. Point number 29, I thought Talia was just using a program to clear out the interference to be able to hear the Sangheili speaking within it, but then the program also went and translated the speech as well. How? I mean, what? In the 6 months between the end of last season and the start of this one, has Miranda Keyes completely translated the Sangheili language, then created and publicly released a program so that other people can translate Sangheili speech as well or something? To round all this off, my most disliked part of the episode goes to the dumbass captain who thought it'd be a good idea to point guns at Silver Team and act incredibly antagonistic towards Chief, despite the fact she was told to convince him to stand down and return to base. And my most liked part of the episode goes to everything with Ackerson, his interactions with his dad, with Kai, with Keyes, with Halsey. Ackerson and his actor Joseph Morgan are seriously still in the show so far. He is great. Thank you all so much for tuning into the Triple S Variety channel. Why not leave a comment below pointing out anything I missed but you noticed? I would love to hear from you all. I've been Triple S, you've all been amazing, and I shall see you all in the next video.